Okay, so what we're going to do today in the writing clinic is to discuss how to write up result sections. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through Carl's weight loss regimen papers from three of you, and there's three sections that were written up from different students, and I'm going to explain to you how to rewrite the section so that it's in a better scientific format. So what you'll get a chance to do is see how I think about condensing and writing concisely, and maybe that's a better form of feedback than actually writing it as a comment on your manuscript. So let's take a look at this first section from a student. The intervention phase in the first graph displayed a decreasing trend in the data with a p-value of 0.037, indicating the slope was statistically significant. However, when there is a statistically significant trend, the ES is no longer an appropriate measure of effect size. Thus, the G-index is an alternative measurement that can be used, which resulted in 0.556. A positive score indicates improvement, and scores between 0.31 and 0.5 are considered to have a medium effect. These are actually, it's pretty good information that's being presented here. The problem is that it's really just kind of wordy. Okay, we don't need to have all that information presented to the reader, because we're assuming that the reader kind of knows what an effect size is or what it all means. So let's go down and let's think about how this might look. Okay, so let's start with the first paragraph. The intervention phase in the first graph displayed a decreasing trend in the data with a p-value of 0.037. Okay, and when there's a significant p-value, that's all you really need to say. So what you could write, which would be just as good, would be there was a statistically significant descending trend in the intervention data, or we can say intervention phase. Okay? And we'll set that off so that you can tell what I'm writing. Okay, so there's a statistically significant descending trend into the intervention phase. Notice how that replaces that. Okay, that's fine. So now we'll get rid of that. Okay. However, there is a statistically significant trend that ES is no longer an appropriate measure of effect size. Okay. Good. Because there was a significant trend, the G-index was used for computation of effect size. And then we could say something like G-index equals 6. The result, what we could do here is just say medium effect size. Okay. Then we have a statement about the autocorrelation and its calculation for the intervention phase, and then the statement from the author here that the significance of R of 2 chances of making type 1 error result in 0.178, indicating no statistical significance. Look how many words are devoted to that statement. Okay? Why not just say a test for autocorrelation showed no significant effect. Okay? So take a look at how tightly worded that is compared to this first paragraph. Now, I'm not expecting you to know this intuitively, because the reason I'm able to write something like this, which is pretty tightly worded, is because I've done this for a long time. Okay? So it's just a matter of practice, really, and getting feedback and paying attention to the feedback. So if you take a look at what's here and what's here, there's clearly fewer words. I've removed information that's not particularly useful to the reader, and again, with experience, you'll know what is useful and what's not useful. Okay, at this point in the stage of your development, you don't really know that yet, so it's my job to help you with that. So this second one right here is a much better paragraph. Conveys the essence of the same information, fewer words. This is going to lead to a shorter results section. Why is that important? because especially back in the day when there used to be print journal articles, not as much, it still happens today, but so much of it's electronic. But back when everything was print, the ink actually was a big part of the cost of producing a journal, and so there was a heavy emphasis on writing concisely. Okay, all right, let's go to the next one, and we'll see here. Okay, here's Carl's weight loss is depicted in Figure 5, and the descriptive statistics for his weight loss are shown in Table 3. During the baseline phase, Carl's weight ranged from 245 to 247, as seen in Table 3. In the intervention phase, his weight ranged from 240 to 245. Carl's mean weight during the baseline phase was 246 and 242.5 in the intervention phase. Baseline phase showed an increasing trend for weight and a decreasing trend in the intervention phase. Okay, so let's tighten it all up. Okay, and again, we'll put it into a different font so we can distinguish what I'm writing. A couple of tips here. When in doubt, don't use tables. Okay, tables take up a lot of space, and then they require you in the manuscript to talk about the table. Much better to actually just put it into the script, or into the narrative, the manuscript itself, rather than referring to a table and having to talk about it anyway. So if you can, avoid using a table. Tables should really only be used when there's so much information there that it would be very cumbersome and misleading to write it all up in one paragraph. Okay, so we try to avoid tables as much as possible, use them only as necessary, but don't use them just to present basic demographic data or basic results and so forth, because you can do that in the text itself. Okay, so why don't we just start off with some of the descriptive statistics. So you could say during the baseline phase, that's fine, Carl's weight ranged from 245 to 247 pounds. Okay? Now the range, who cares, really? I mean, I might even think about this and say, okay, so what? I mean, you got a 2-pound range here. How useful is that? Okay? So what I'd rather do is just report the mean, during that phase, because the range isn't really giving us a whole lot of information. So unfortunately, we don't have the mean here. So we could say, let's just make up a mean. Okay, during the baseline phase, well, actually, let's even back it up more and say Carl's say average daily weight changed from baseline, and then we say mean equals, let's say it was 246. And let's say his mean was 242. And then we might say there was an increasing trend in weight during baseline and a decreasing trend during intervention. Done. Okay. So notice here what we have in the original paragraph was Carl's weight range from 245 to 247. Then we have another range, and then we have a mean. Oh, we do have the mean right there. Carl's mean weight during the baseline phase was 246, so I got it right. Not bad. And then this becomes 242.5. Okay. Now, what's missing here is we don't have a standard deviation, right? I mean, it would be nice to include the standard deviation because that provides a measure of variation and how much spread there is off of that mean. So what I could do is I could say, okay, SD equals XX dot XX, if we're going to carry it out to the hundredths. Always a good idea to carry out data to the hundredths. So if I were to have the student rewrite this, I would like to say, okay, let's carry out the pounds to the hundredths for the mean, and then the standard deviation would come in like that. Okay? So this essentially gives you the information that you need. The range isn't particularly all that useful. We know that there's going to be some random fluctuations. It doesn't help us all that much in understanding this case to put in the range. Okay, so I hope that that's clear. Do you see how that looks a little different? Much tighter in the writing, much more concise. You're conveying the essence of the same information, and this is what I'd like you to focus on as you move into any additional writing in the future, whether it's for exams or for reaction papers where we're interpreting data. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Graph 3 shows the exercise over days. The left side is the baseline sessions and the right side is the intervention sessions. Okay, I can tell you right here you don't need to say that, because anybody who's seen a single subject design, they're going to know that. So we don't need to do that, and especially if you've labeled the graph, you don't need to say it again. By looking at the graph, you can see the increase in Carl's exercise during the intervention sessions. And I don't know why it's plural. You don't have multiple interventions, just one, so just say intervention, signifying the treatment worked. Okay. Now, that's a little problematic because at this point, you're not just reporting data, you're not creating a results section, you're actually interpreting the data. Okay, so that's the type of thing that really should be left for the discussion section. You know, you can certainly present, for example, an effect size and interpret it and say, yeah, that, you know, whatever we got here, that signifies a medium to large effect or something like that. That's fine. But saying signifying the treatment worked really is not a presentation of results. That is now a discussion of the results, and that needs to be left out of a results section. The mean for exercise over days was 0.6 and 2.9 for the intervention sessions. Okay, the mean for exercise over days, I'm assuming 0.6 is the baseline, although it's not said in the sentence, and 2.9 for intervention. But see, we don't know what units these are in. This is actually in miles walked, right? So 0.6 miles walked, not just 0.6. 0.6 means what? Okay, the median for exercise over days was 0.5 for the baseline sessions and 3.2 for intervention. Okay, again, you don't know the unit that it's in. Standard deviation for exercise over days was 0.75 during baseline and 1.89 during the intervention. Okay, that's fine. So we're getting the right data. It's just not being presented in a way that's clear to the reader. Okay, the range for the phases comes down here, and again, don't need that. It's not particularly helpful for us. Now, what might be helpful is to say, okay, the proportion of days where Carl didn't exercise at all, or the proportion of data points that overlapped from intervention to the baseline points. So that might be useful, but just reporting the range doesn't really helping us. And then it says, when analyzing this data, now keep in mind data, that word's a plural, so if you're going to say this data, it's incorrect. You should say these data. When analyzing these data, you can see that each number during the baseline phase was smaller than the numbers for the intervention phase. Okay, what do we mean by numbers? Do we mean the values that we're observing in terms of miles walked? What does that refer to? This is significant for this data because it shows an increase in, and that's not a good word, right? Exercise. So, and also be careful about the use of the word significant, right? When we say significant, we usually mean statistically significant, not just meaningful. Okay, graph 4 shows the line of regression for behavior over time during the baseline sessions. Notice it doesn't tell the reader what that shows. It's just saying, oh, there's graph 4. And then lastly, table 6 shows the ANOVA for exercise over days. Again, nothing about what's in the ANOVA, just there it is, folks, and then you interpret it for yourself. So you actually have to, present this in a way that in the text itself, in the manuscript itself, the reader understands what it is you're saying. So I'm not going to do this whole paragraph because there's a lot here, but let's just start with how we would present some of this. First of all, I've been saying on pretty much all your papers, include subheadings. So if you're going through a results section, let's then add in, and again, I got to go up here. Let's add in a subheading heading that says daily exercise. So the reader knows what you're talking about. Okay, so that's our subheading. So daily exercise. And now we want to go through and just explain to the reader the basic descriptive statistics. So we could say average daily exercise, and we'll put it in units here, miles walked, during the baseline phase was 0.6, and then SD equals 0.75, and increased during the intervention phase to 2.90, SD equals 1.89. Okay. Now, look at that. Okay, look how much information's in that one sentence. Average daily exercise, miles walks during the baseline phase was 0.6, and increase during the intervention phase 2.90. I pretty much covered right there all the relevant information in those sentences. Okay, and in fact, it's clearer here, right, because I've specified what I mean by this, miles walked. Okay, I've given the mean and I've given the standard deviations. Now I'm going to just, I don't need this range here. Okay, I might add a sentence here about the proportion of days, like I said, in which Carl walked. I'm not calculating that now, but I could add one sentence here with that. When analyzing the data, you can see that each number during the baseline phase was smaller than the numbers during the intervention phase. Again, not a particularly useful statement, especially since there were a couple days during the intervention phase in which Carl didn't walk, if I recall the data correctly. So I'm not sure what that means. And then a statement, this is significant for this data because it shows an increase in exercise. Okay, well, we already know there's an increase in exercise because this mean is 2.90 and during baseline is 0.6. So this sentence doesn't help us much. And then these following things here, we might want to elaborate on a little bit. So I might say regression results showed blah, 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 and then elaborate, from there. So I think, one of the things that as you practice this, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge about how to just tighten up the writing, just present what you need to present, and then spend more time in the discussion talking about the results rather than wasting all these words during the results section. Okay? I hope that was helpful. We'll be doing some more of this.